Today we're painting the frontline troops of the Sisters of Battle, the Repentia. Roll the music. Hello, and welcome back to Scuffed Hammer. My name is Hammer. Today we are painting some Repentia, some of the most fierce fighters in the entirety of the Sisters of Battle line. And while these models have some very interesting lore, for me they are just the right amount of grimdark without being grimderp, as I find the Sisters of Battle line tends to do. But enough waffling, let's get into actually painting the models. Now these models are already assembled. That's because they're some of the first models I ever built for my Sisters of Battle. I first got into Sisters of Battle when they first announced the new combat patrol. And I'd been umming and ahhing about whether I would get into a second army or not. And then I saw how atrocious the new combat patrol was, and I just knew I had to get the old one before it was gone. But enough reminiscing, let's talk about what I'm working on. I'm doing a dry brushing of Skavenblight Dinge on the skin because this is my homebrew faction. These Sisters of Battle are an order that were saved by the Salamanders and have chosen to honour them by following the Promethean cult. And in typical Sisters of Battle fashion, they've taken it a step too far. They saw the charcoal black skin of the Salamanders and decided that in order to honour them properly, that they would need the same coloured skin. But because that is a gene seed mutation, and as we all know, women can't get gene seed, they decided to tattoo every inch of their body to make it the same colour as the Salamanders. And they even injected chemicals into their eyes to make them the same glowing fiery red. So by using a dry brushing technique, I can add some depth and detail to the muscles without doing too much. And I don't want to do too much. I've started to reach a bit of hobby burnout and decided with this project, I just wanted to do something simple and quick, just so I can keep that ball rolling and keep my creative juices flowing, but not do something that stresses me out so much I'm just gonna give up altogether. And by keeping it to relatively simple techniques like dry brushing, contrasts, glazes, that kind of thing, I can limit the amount of stress I'm putting myself under while still knocking out an entire unit and feeling productive. And keeping it simple can even look as easy as this right here, using one colour for the cloth and then coming in a little bit later with a wash so it doesn't seem as flat. And you're achieving a relatively good looking model with a very low ceiling of skill. And I continue that trend with the copious amounts of parchment that covers these models. One simple colour, come in with a wash, and I'm not even going to attempt to put squiggly lines all over them. That will just make me want to bash my head against a wall. Now this isn't the first time I've faced hobby burnout, but this is the first time that I felt the need to push through. And I can say that it definitely worked. In the past when I've burnt out, I've just put the brush down, and it's so hard to pick it back up once you stop that for me it took nearly 4 or 5 months before I actually put a brush to a model again. And here at Scuffed Hammer, we know that hobby burnout is a real issue that every hobbyist faces. And don't worry, this isn't a sponsorship, this is just a self-plug, so you can hop on over to our Discord where we are trying to build an awesome community of hobbyists to support each other and encourage each other through hard times, good times, and everything in between. And while we're on our little spiel, why don't you remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you like our content. It helps out the channel a bunch. Back to the painting, I'm using Balthazar Gold here just because it's a more dirty, grounded colour and it feels less regal and more practical than actual gold. And since these sisters are trying to die in battle to atone for their sins, it wouldn't make much sense if they were sent to the front lines decked out in the flashiest gear you could find. Moving on to the Repentia Superior, I decided to employ sponging as another easy and quick technique. By doing this, I achieved a worn look, like this armor has been worn by hundreds if not thousands of Repentia Superiors before her. And it was around this point that I actually broke through my hobby burnout and actually started having fun with the model I was painting. Again, opting for the practical look, I decided to paint all of the cloth as a heavy leather. In my mind, this would provide a little bit extra armor and protection, and it looks less silly in my eyes than if she was wearing regal purple and gold cloth that makes her stand out on the battlefield. And as I just mentioned, this is where I started having fun. I wasn't planning on making her look flashy, but I decided to add a little bit of Balthazar gold to this for, again, the more practical over impractical material usage. And then for the first time ever, I decided to do a little bit of cross-hatching by mixing the two different leather colors together and making them slightly darker and slightly lighter than the colors I'd already used. And I'm not too sure if I got it right. This is the first time I've ever done it, and I did it on a whim. I didn't look up any tutorials or anything. So if you've done this before and it's a technique you're fond of, and you're just watching this and going, oh my goodness, Hammer, you're just screwing it up so badly, what are you doing? Leave a comment below, maybe mention a channel that does a good tutorial, and I'll check it out. I added a few little details like her eye patch, her hair, and her glowing red eye before I moved on to the whips. Now, I was originally just going to do these as leather whips, but I'd already done so much leather that I felt like it would be too much brown on one model. Instead, I decided on a whim again to do power whips. Yet again, I didn't look up a tutorial, I just went with what felt right, which was starting with a darker color and moving my way up through lighter colors until I reached a bright white. I was attempting to make it look like electricity was traveling up and down the whip, and overall I think I did a pretty good job. I had a lot of fun painting this part of the model. It's probably the most fun I've had painting a model in a very long time. And I think it's all due to me just trying and experimenting and coming out with a good result without planning it ahead. And I think that's a pretty good indicator that sometimes you just need to go wild and try something new. I say this as I'm jumping back into one of my most used techniques, which is fire. Going from white, yellow, orange, red, making sure to wet blend in between so it doesn't look like candy corn, and boom, fire. As a Salamanders and Sisters player, I have had to paint a lot of fire, and when you use a technique a lot, it becomes second nature and really easy. And speaking of easy, it's time for the bases. So that they fit the rest of my army, I'm using the same red and yellow paints I stole from my mother's craft cupboard when I went back home for the holidays, and then I'm using a little bit of Modern Earth technical paint to put over the top, which will dry and crack and create a very easy lava base effect. As with any technical paint, the more you put on, the easier it will be to get the effect you're looking for, but if you put too much on, it will be way too a dramatic effect, unless of course that's what you're going for. Just keep that in mind when you're using pretty much any of the GW technical paints. And with our bases having been finished up, it's about time for a final reveal. Well, that about wraps us up for today's video. Being able to push through my artist block and actually put some paint to models this time helped a bunch. I also worked on a few projects on the side. I didn't turn my camera on for those ones. This was just some personal projects I wanted to get knocked out of the way so I could get back to working on videos for you guys. And while to start with I really didn't want to paint these models, in the end I ended up having a blast. So I hope that you guys can use this as a lesson that sometimes you just need to push through and eventually you'll get to doing what you want to do. But Also, sometimes you do just need to take a break. Make sure to look after yourselves. And that's about all from me. My name's Hammer, and I'll see you guys next time.